Speedway Productions now presents TrackSide from the Lernerville Speedway. Today's program is presented in cooperation with Triangle Benefit Service, Number One Cochran Automotive, Classic Impressions, and Yingling Lager. Your hosts for TrackSide are Don Gamble, Dick Curry, DJ Johnson, Eric Westendorf, and Walt Weimer.
Good evening and welcome to TrackSide. I'm Don Gamble. Tonight at Lernerville Speedway, in addition to the late model sprints and street stocks, it's the Joe Pitkavish Memorial Race for the Modifieds. We have a special pre-recorded program tonight featuring interviews with Joe Pitkavish's son, Jim, legendary modified driver Blackie Watt, and our resident expert on the modifieds, Walt Weimer. If you need more information about tonight's racing program at Lernerville Speedway, you can call the track office at 724-353-1511, or you can check the track website, lernerville.com. We begin tonight's program with our first guest, Jim Pitkavish.
Fans, tonight is the Joe Pitkavish Memorial Modified Race, and we've gathered some interviews with a lot of the modified drivers, but we're going to kick the show off tonight talking to his son, Jim. Jim, we go way back with Dad. I understand you were in grade school. Let's talk about your first memories, first recollections of Dad and racing.
The first memory I have was we raced at Spring Church up in Apollo. We had a flathead Ford. That was my dad's first race car. My uncle drove it. His name was Bucky Walters. And it was number 13 and 7/8 was the number. I mean, that was always a big joke as the year went by about our first number, 13 and 7/8.
What year was that?
That would have to be early 50s.
Okay, now, after your first driver, when Dad got started, let's progress. I know that his most famous driver was Blackie, but let's work our way up to that.
Okay, we had Bucky Walters, that was my uncle, and then Paul Walters drove for my dad. There were no relation. But then we had Chuck Harpster and Dick Hecker. They both drove at the same time. My dad had two cars then. It was Big Five and Little Five, they called them. And then we had Bob Schaffenarker drove for us for a while. Dick Schwartzlander drove for a while. I drove myself for 3.5 years. I drove my dad's car while Blackie was racing NASCAR. And we had a little bit of success, not like with the more experienced drivers. I was not that good of a driver.
My first recollection of Dad racing, Hecker was driving. I believe it was car number 37. They were running into PRA, and you had to pick the number where you were in the point standing, so that's why a lot of the times the numbers changed. Now, picking it up from there, and that would have been in the mid to late 50s, when did Blackie get the ride with your dad?
Well, when PRA quit running the modifieds, they switched to sprint cars. So we had nowhere to run. So we went up to Jennerstown. And Dick Hecker was driving then. And he just didn't want to go that far, travel that far. So we needed a driver. And Blackie had come down to my dad's garage several years before to ask him if he could drive for him. And at that time, my dad had Hecker driving, and he was satisfied, and so he turned Blackie down. And then when we ended up at Jennerstown, Blackie was there. So Hecker drove for a couple of weeks, and then he decided he didn't want to go up there. So Dad asked Blackie if he wanted to drive the car. And Blackie was already committed to another car at that time, and he said, "I'll see what I can do." So he somehow got out of the other car, because Blackie doesn't just jump out of a car once he doesn't leave anybody stranded like that. So he came back down to the garage and told Dad he wanted to drive, and the rest just went on from there.
I don't think anybody could have envisioned the success that the team would have with your dad's cars and Blackie as a driver. My first recollection of Blackie in one of your dad's cars, I believe it was a number 88, and I think he went to Langhorne and set fast time.
Yes, he did. That was in 1961. He set a new track record at that day, and it was number 88, and it was a Chrysler Hemi, 392 Hemi was in that car.
As I recall, and I did some TV interviews with Blackie, that when you got to Langhorne, everybody was making fun because the motor was up in the regular position and the body was way in the back, and I guess the comment was, I don't think these fellas know what they're doing, and then after he set fast time, it was a different tune. Yeah,
people were all over the car after he set the track record, because he was coming through the pits, and he said, I knew I had a good time, he said, because everybody was looking at me coming through the infield. And he said, as I drive down through past the other cars, everybody was turning around looking at me. He said, so I knew I had a good time. He said, but I didn't know it was a track record at the time.
I remember a lot of the coupes with the 88 on it. There was even a blue one. Vale Tech was a sponsor, and I think that the fellow that painted it, Graham, was that Bob Graham, Kodiak?
Yes, that was Bob Graham. Yeah, he was an instructor at Vale Tech, and he helped arrange for our sponsorship. Vale Tech sponsored us for 2 years, and we had our car painted, instead of our regular red and white, we had it painted blue and yellow. That was the school colors.
I think my favorite car of your dad's was the 37 Chevy Coupe, and every track, victory lane, win. What precipitated the change from that to the newer style bodies? I would imagine it was a whole new car.
Well, yeah, the coupes kind of ran out their time. I mean, the newer style bodies are more aerodynamic and to take better advantage of the wind, where the coupes, you was really struggling with those, because a couple of guys even tried to run coupes against these cars they have now, and they just don't work as good.
We're talking with Jim Pitkavish, Joe's son, and we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more after this.
Is your race team looking for T-shirts, hats, or other racing apparel? Check out Classic Impressions Racewear in Pittsburgh. Go to www.classicimp.com and see over 200 designs and the latest in racing apparel. And if you see a great-looking shirt at the track, there's a good chance it's a Racewear shirt. If you're looking for dynamic racing T-shirts with no art or setup charges and low minimums, check out their Speed Gear line. Classic Impressions features the best-looking shirts around. Give them a call at 412-257-8020 or toll-free 1-800-775-8337, or visit the Classic Impressions website at www.classicimp, that's CLASSICIMP.com.
M. Reno Trailer Sales and Service on Route 30 in North Huntington have the right set of wheels for you. Marion Reno has been involved in racing for over 20 years and is starting his 11th year in trailer sales and service. Reno understands what the racers need, and he's ready to help you get where you want to be. Stop in at M. Reno Trailer Sales and Service on Route 30 in North Huntington for the best deals in western Pennsylvania. Enclosed trailers are available from American Hauler and Storm Manufacturing, or you can let Reno design and build your next race car trailer. He also sells open trailers built by Sure Track. They build anything from a 4x8 homeowner trailer to a 48-foot, 26,000-pound construction trailer. The absolute nicest steel frame trailers on the market. For more information, call 724-864-7366 or toll free at 866-716-RENO. You can visit the website at mrenotrailers.com. You're listening to TrackSide from Lernerville Speedway.
Okay, fans, we're back. We're talking with Jim Pitkavish, Joe Pitkavish's son. When you went to the new body style, is that when the number changed from the 88 to the 1?
No, we had number 1 on that on that 37 Chevy. That was number one. We used to run a lot of Schmuckers. And what happened was when we weren't racing dirt for a couple of years. We were just racing Langhorne and Trenton. And we decided we didn't want to run asphalt anymore, so we changed the car over to run on dirt, and then our number was already taken. In fact, Ed Lynch had our number at that time. He had number 88. So there's a couple of numbers were available, so 1 and 5 and a couple others. So we just took number 1, and we've stuck with it ever since.
It was a very appropriate number. Now, of all the races, and I'm not sure you could even count how many that Blackie had won. Was there a favorite race or a favorite racetrack or a favorite event?
No, not really. We were pretty proud of the fact that we had probably would be the Langhorne when we set the track record, because there was 152 cars qualified that day, and we had the fastest car there. And it was all a homemade car. We built everything. My dad built his own motor. We built that car from the bare frame up. We bent our own roll bars. That car was all built in my dad's garage. And to go out to Philadelphia and race against all the best on the whole East Coast. There was cars there from Florida, clean up through Maine and Massachusetts. And the best of the East was there. And to have the fastest car there was really satisfying. I mean, we were pleased with that.
I know your dad was very particular about maintenance on the car, and correct me if I'm wrong, Blackie drove for 25 years. You always ran the Chrysler engines, and it's my understanding it was the same engine block?
Yeah, we had two Hemis. The first one we got was never on the highway. It came right to our garage from Detroit in a crate. And it was the engine number on it was 002, and it was never on the highway at all. And we had that motor for the whole time, and then we bought another one out of a wrecked car just for a spare. But the original one was the one that we kept all those years. We ran it with the same crankshaft in it for 12 years, and he broke it out at Schmuckers. Blackie was coming through the turn, and my dad heard it crack. It sounded like a rifle shot, and then Blackie shut it down right away and coasted off the track, and he saved the motor. Actually broke the crankshaft and saved the motor.
That's amazing. Now, how did you get the motor, especially one with the number 002?
I don't know how. But Veltec was involved in that. They helped us get it. In fact, they paid for it, and they even sent people out to Detroit to pick it up. So whether he knew somebody out there or somebody, I don't know how we come about it, but we ended up with 002.
That's amazing. Now, prior to that, were the engines always Chrysler, or were there different kinds? I know you said you had a flathead. Between the flathead and the Chrysler, what were the motors?
DeSoto Firedome. After the flathead, in 1952, we got a DeSoto Firedome. It came the same way. It came in a crate. It was never on the highway, and we ran the Firedomes until for several years until about 57, 58 when the 392 Chryslers come out. Those are all Hemis. The Firedome was a Hemi, and the 392 Chryslers were Hemis. We've always run Hemis.
What a tribute to your dad and you and the rest of the crew for the maintenance to be that good to run a motor for 25 years. That just boggles my mind. Now, the car just came from a radiator shop over in town. It wasn't a high-dollar team, but, boy, the results were amazing.
Well, my dad, I give all the credit to my dad. He was so intelligent. He could do things that were unbelievable. I mean, he bought a stroker kit from Hank the Crank for the one Hemi, and he put aluminum rods in it. And he had all that money, and he paid $1,600 just for the crankshaft, and that was back like 20 years ago or more. And he had all that money in that, and he built it all himself. Nobody ever built his motors. He built all his own motors. In fact, he used to build the motors for Chet Johnson's car when Blackie was driving for Riddle Brothers. They were running Rayburns, and my dad was building those motors. And Blackie won a lot of features for Chet with my dad's motors in it.
Where did he develop these skills, these engine building skills?
He taught himself all that. I mean, reading. He read. He was always reading and learning, and he would read anything that he could learn from. And I often tell people that he's the most intelligent man I ever met. I mean, he remodeled his own house from the bottom to the top. I mean, he could do anything. He taught himself how to rebuild automatic transmissions and rebuild carburetors. He never went to school for any of that. In fact, he never even finished grade school. He come from a poor town in West Virginia, and he didn't have any kind of education. But when he was just a young kid in West Virginia, he used to build radios. And so at night, the people would all gather around and listen to my dad's radio at night, with nothing to do. You know, back in those days, there was no television or anything. So, but he was so intelligent, and I actually think he could have been a college professor. That's what his sisters always said, that if times would have been different, if he could have went to college, who knows what he could have done, because he could learn so much, and he could retain that knowledge. I mean, the things he would learn, he never forgot them.
I think most of the modified competitors would agree that he was pretty intelligent, but he wasn't real flamboyant, kind of quiet, kept to himself, an amazing gentleman. We're talking to Jim Pitkavish, Joe's son, and we need to take another break, and we'll be back with more after these messages.
The staff at Napa Auto Parts of Verona on Allegheny River Boulevard understand how important it is to have the right part for the right job. One of the largest inventories of auto parts and accessories in the Pittsburgh area. The ASE certified parts specialist at Napa Auto Parts of Verona have the answers to your tough automotive questions. Call them today at 412-828-3581. That's 412-828-3581. Or stop by Napa Auto Parts of Verona on Allegheny River Boulevard.
We have a great new sponsor for our show this year, Triangle Benefit Services, co-owned by Dina Barbara and her husband Charles. Dina is one of our co-hosts and a former driver of the number 77 Micro Sprint and 77 Sprint car. Dina and her husband Charles run an insurance agency, and they can help you with your homeowners, auto insurance, and insurance for about any other toy you might have. Look, if you have a race car, they can't help you. But if you have a boat, an ATV, an RV, travel trailer, vacation home, motorcycle, rental property, classic car, muscle car, not to mention your Haas and family car, they can insure it for you. Charles and his assistants can give you a quote from many different companies, including Donegal, as well as several other major companies: Progressive, AIG, Ohio Casualty, American Collectors, and Dairyland. Because they can quote through so many different companies, they'll find you the best price. Triangle Benefit Services is located at 128 Clairton Boulevard, Pittsburgh, PA. You can call them at 412-650-6500 or visit them at trianglebenefitservices.com.
Adrenaline, cover to cover. That's what you get every month with Dirt Late Model Magazine. Read features on your favorite local, regional, and professional drivers. See the best photography, learn more about new products, and read about the big races and issues that impact dirt late model racing. Go to 3widemedia.com to see how you can subscribe to the best coverage of dirt late model racing. That's 3widemedia.com. Go to 3widemedia.com and subscribe today. Dirt Late Model Magazine.
All right, fans, we're back. Don Gamble and Jim Pitkavish. Tonight's the Joe Pitkavish Memorial Race. Jim, we were talking about your dad and how successful and how intelligent he was. Some of the background, other than racing, that Dad was involved in.
Well, he didn't do much as far as other sports or anything like that. He didn't do any. He wasn't into hunting, fishing, or nothing like that. He didn't go to bars. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He was just really into racing, and that's what his whole life was after my uncle got him started in it back with Flathead Ford.
There was a time when Blackie was hurt, and I believe the quote was, "The car's going to sit because if Blackie can't drive it, we're not going to run it."
That's exactly right. If the car sat all year, that's when Blackie he went off the track and motordrome in Chet Johnson's car, and he ended up on the pit road coming up outside the racetrack, and he cracked a bone in his back, and he couldn't race anymore that year. So we had several people call wanting to drive the car, But Dad said, I built the car for Blackie, and nobody else is going to drive it. So the car just sat all year on jack stands in the garage, and we just looked at it. No maintenance, nothing to do. We'd go to the races and watch other people race, but no other driver ever sat in it.
As best I can recall, and that's from the mid-50s till Dad finally gave it up, Blackie was pretty good with the equipment. I don't ever recall him rolling him over or bad crashes. Sure, there were crashes, but was there ever a situation that was pretty bad?
Well, we destroyed a brand new car at Langhorne. That's after they paved it, and he was coming down the front straightaway, and Dave Kneisel, we got to be friends with him later on, a couple years later. He blew the motor right in front of Blackie, and Blackie hit that oil, and he went into the wall so hard, hit on into the wall, and it was a brand new car, and the frame was laying on the ground, and the front wheels were pushed up in front of the windshield. And Blackie said that was the hardest hit he ever had, and he said he actually saw stars. He thought he was going to get knocked out, but he didn't.
As Dad and Blackie got toward the end of the career, finally he decided to give it up. When did that happen, and what brought the decision about?
Well, my mother was starting to worry about my dad because he was getting up in years, but nobody actually knew how old he was. He was in such good shape, and my mother was putting pressure on him to retire. She thought he's working too hard and putting in too many hours, and the doctor kept telling him, whatever you're doing, keep it up because you're in excellent shape. But my mother wanted him to start cutting back, so he decided to call it a career and decided to quit racing. On the 25th year together, in fact, on the back of the car, we had a silver number 1 on the back for 25 years together with Dad and Blackie.
As the tradition continues, we're at Lernerville, and there's a very familiar orange number 1, which your son has in the late model division. I think it's kind of interesting that it's not a modified, but a late model.
Yeah, when he wanted to get into racing, in fact, we were out of it for a couple of years, and him and his best friend all his life, Bob Peterson, and him, they went to school together, and they've been best friends all their lives, and they decided they wanted to have a race car, and Bob didn't want to drive. He wanted to own a car, and Jimmy wanted to drive. So they asked me to go look at an E-Mod with them, and I said, you don't want to do that. It's just too expensive. So they said, yes, we do. We want to try it. So we went and looked at it, and they bought it, and they bought a piece of junk is what they bought. Something was wore out, and somebody else was done with it. So they struggled with that for a couple of years, and then I preferred to see him in a modified because I don't think there's a safer race car built than a modified. But they decided they had a chance to get a good deal on a late model. So they sold the E-Mod and bought the late model, and that's where they've been ever since.
I remember coming up to Schmucker's and seeing the E-Mod. I believe it was 193, and Blackie in his fire suit, and I thought, oh my God, I've been asleep for 25 years. I'm Rip Van Winkle. We're back at Schmucker's, and Blackie is in an orange and black Pitkavish modified. It was kind of a funny situation.
Yeah, see, we got Blackie to try to, he was going to help us get the car sorted out to get it working, and he said the car handles so poorly. He said, I don't even want Jimmy in this because Blackie and us, we're like a family. We're not just friends, and we keep in touch all the time. And he said, I'm afraid Jimmy's going to get hurt in this car because he said, with my experience, he said, I have my hands full. He said, I can't even run close to anybody. I don't know what this car's going to do. And it was just an oddball car. Nobody else ran that kind. It was a Lightning chassis, and we were the only one that had it. And it was wore out, and we just couldn't get it to work, and Blackie he had his hands full with it.
We're talking with Jim Pitkavish, Joe's son. The team has finally got the late model working. We can only hope that they will have success similar to what Dad and Blackie had, but that's going to be tough to do. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us, and as the teams honor your dad, you should be very proud.
Well, I certainly am. I couldn't be prouder. He was a very, very wonderful person. He's never talked down to anybody. I mean, he never badmouthed the competition. Even though we won a lot of races, He never criticized anybody else, and even there were times when new drivers would take us out of a race, unintentionally, but Dad wouldn't get mad. He said they have a right to be out there too.
Jim, it's my understanding that in June, Joe's wife passed away. Our sympathies to you and the family. I would imagine that much of his success was due to the fact that he had a supportive wife that understood the time and the commitment to go with the racing.
Oh yeah, she was very supportive. She was always at the races. I remember when I was pretty young, back in the days when we were running Heidelberg, PRA in Heidelberg, South Park, and those places. She was always there, always at the races. And it wasn't until later she got older that she didn't go as often, but she really enjoyed the races.
Again, our sympathies to you and your family, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Number 1 Concord Automotive is the largest, most exciting General Motors auto complex on the East Coast. You'll find 7 sensational nameplates, bright customer-focused showrooms, plus acres and acres of pure selection. Enter the Mega Center. It's bigger, it's better. The Cochrane Cafe is everything from light bites to hot entrees, salads to sandwiches. From now on, our cars aren't the only thing that will make your mouth water. The cafe is located in the Pontiac Buick GMC building. The new Quick Serve Center features 18-minute oil changes while you remain in the comfort of your car. All makes and models are welcome, and no appointment is necessary. Visit the new number 1 Cochrane Automotive Mega Center at 4520 William Penn Highway in Monroeville, the largest, most exciting General Motors auto complex on the East Coast. It's bigger, it's better.
Race fans, send your taste buds to Victory Lane with some delicious products from R&J Meats at 367 Perry Highway, Pittsburgh, PA. R&J Meats was the winner of the Best Burger Contest at the Lernerville Speedway Firecracker 100. Judges, World of Outlaw late model driver Shane Clanton and Lernerville Speedway track photographer Corey Stuyvesant were impressed with the delicious Kibasi burger entered by R&J Meats. R&J Meats carries a complete line of products that will make you happy to cook, regardless of whether it's dinner, a picnic, or a cookout at the track. R&J Meats has been involved in racing for over 2 decades, and they understand what racers look for in good food. Stop in at R&J Meats at 367 Perry Highway, Pittsburgh, PA 15229. Go with the winner when you decide to enjoy a nice meal. For more information, give them a call at 412-931-8807.
Race car drivers take pride in their equipment. Did you see Lynn Geisler's new car? It's a Car Fab Body by Andy Kennedy. If you can drive it, Andy can cover it. Give him a call at 724-713-7817 at Car Fab Bodies. Andy's work is often imitated, never duplicated. He also has 4x10 colored aluminum sheets available. If you want a beautiful body, call Andy at Car Fab Bodies, 724-713-7817. Remember, you only get one chance to make a good first impression.
And now more Trackside from the Lernerville Speedway.
And joining us now is good friend and racing legend Blackie Watt. Blackie, good evening.
Hello, Don. How you doing?
We're doing well. I thought it would be appropriate to have you on tonight because we want to talk about the upcoming Joe Pitkavish Memorial Race on July 25th. And as long as I've been around racing, I guess I really didn't start to notice Blackie Watt until you hooked up with Joe Pitkavish. Let's talk about how you two got together.
You know, back in about 58, I was down there at Heidelberg Speedway, and I was watching Joe Pitkavish's car going around side by side beside Herb Scott for about 4 laps. And I thought, holy cow, if that thing was down the inside. Now, he was on the outside of Herb Scott, running 4 laps side by side. And I thought if that car, Bob Schaefnocker was driving, and I thought if that car was driven better, I thought I could do a good job driving it. So I went down, I found out where Joe lived, and I went down and I asked Joe to drive his car. And he said he would maybe give me a call, but he never did. And about a year and a half later, Pittsburgh Racing Association quit running modified down there, and Joe had to find another place to run. So he went up to Jennerstown, and Dick Hecker was driving it then. And the first night up there, whether we got rained out or what happened. Anyway, Dick Hecker told Joe, he said, that car never went up here. So Joe went back up the next week, and Hecker didn't show up. So he put one of the Woy brothers in the car, and he didn't do too well with it. He got it cracked up. And I went over to see Joe. And I said, Joe, have you decided what you're going to do for a driver? And he said, I haven't thought about it too much yet. And I said, well, I asked you a year and a half ago to drive your car. I'd appreciate a chance driving it. Like I said before, if I can't do the job, I'll get out of it as quick as I got in it. And so we give it a try. And that lasted for 25 years.
Did you have any idea? I mean, nobody could have known. I mean, the hundreds and hundreds of wins. And I'm guessing from my conversations with you before, you're probably somewhere over 600 victories. But the concept of you and Joe being together for 25 years, ran the same engine for 25 years, it's incredible.
It is. Joe is a great mechanic and so forth. One thing about his car, it hardly ever broke down. I took notice that before I ever started driving it. But if he did have any mechanical failures at all, he tried to figure out why. And he usually improved it, and he didn't have a second mishap happen the second time.
Blackie, did you have any racing experience before you talked to Joe? I mean, we're accustomed now to the superstars in the late models and the modifieds starting out in street stocks or pure stocks, then moving up through the divisions. Had you raced anything else prior to talking to Joe?
I drove a lot of different cars before that. I started in 1951. I had my own cars to start with, and then I drove for Steve Vilsack and Ted Tedesco and numerous other guys. I can't even remember who all I drove for.
Well, Mike's a little too young, but I do remember you driving for Vilsack, and I guess of all the cars you've had, probably the funniest and ugliest was that Hudson.
That was the one I built. I call it the Purple People Eater.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was probably fast, but it was a little rugged. And then, anybody would go to my website could see some of the cars you ran. I'd like to talk about the time you guys went to Langhorne. That was in the '88 car, which was a Ford sedan cut down. The body's in the back, the motor's in the regular spot. Explain what happened when you got to Langhorne.
Well, what really happened to start with is Joe moved the body back, anticipating on moving the motor back. He didn't have time to do that, and we raced it all summer with the motor setting forward. And so when I went out on a racetrack at Langhorne, the announcer made a remark about, well, apparently these people don't know what they're doing. He says, because most people set their motor back, not realizing he was going to do it eventually. But then I went out and I set a new track record in 1961. And he said, apparently these people do know what they're doing.
Yeah. Now, that car, you guys ran that for a while. When, I guess the 37 Chevy was built specifically to run on asphalt?
I don't really think it was especially built for that. I think Joe just decided to build something newer. Because we never run a whole lot of asphalt.
Well, and then that car, I guess, with the Dodge Hemi engine, had, 110 victories with that, the original orange and black #1. That's pretty impressive. And I know I had the pleasure of going to many of the tracks where you were and seeing you in victory lane. It was almost a foregone conclusion that when you and Pitkavish rolled in, I guess they would ask who was going to be second.
It's like Dick Noel. He used to say, if Blackie won and I come in second, I felt like I won.
Now, with this combination, you guys won titles. I guess 74 was your best year. 36 wins. You won the championship at Lernerville, Motordrome, and Schmuckers. And that's got to be, I mean, very few guys can do 2 championships in a year, let alone 3. Some of your thoughts on what that was like and how that all came together.
Well, we just went out and did the best. If they got the place we were doing so well that if I didn't win, people would ask me why I didn't. One time we was down at Bedford in a late model car, and these people down there in a street stock car, they were so excited and so forth. I think, well, they haven't run the feature. I thought maybe they won the feature way. They're all excited and screaming and yelling. All they did was make the feature. Well, if I didn't win the feature, people want to know why I didn't.
Yeah, so what was wrong, huh?
Yeah, what happened?
Blackie, I cover the touring series for Rappin' on Racing here, and the drivers that have to travel all over the country like the World of Outlaws. And knowing that you've raced at Daytona and Langhorne and tracks all over the country, now that your career is over, are the fondest memories from going far from home and racing with the celebrities, or are the fondest memories of your home tracks like Latrobe and Lernerville?
Well, it's nice at home because you had the championships and stuff like that. One race in particular up at Blanket Hill and so forth, there was a crack the whip where, the last car, if you got past, you was eliminated. Is that the crack whip or is that Pursuit?
No, that was the Australian Pursuit race.
Pursuit.
Yeah.
Well, Joe was he was a good man and an honest man and straight-faced, and people thought he was a sourpuss, but he wasn't. He was a heck of a nice fella. Now, I went out there in the Australian Pursuit, and I started last. Of course, I passed a few after the flag, passed a few in 1 or 2 turns, passed a few, went down the back straightaway, and in the 3 turns, I passed a couple, and coming out of 4 turns, only 2 left to pass, and they slipped. Well, I went down to the flag, and in 1 lap, I won the race. So I went in the pits, and I looked up to Joe with a straight face, and I says, "All right." He looked back. "That's the way to go, Blackie." He says, "Don't wear the equipment on." He turned around and walked away, never smiled. That was his way of saying things. It was funny.
Over the years, I guess it was sort of like a father-son relationship. You guys got along so well for so long.
That's true. For 25 years, we never, ever had an argument. We maybe had some discussions, and 9 chances out of 10 when we discussed, his viewpoint was probably better than mine. So we never had a disagreement.
You were doing multiple duty with the late model and the modified, and I was at Motordrome in '83 when you had that bad accident. Steering broke, you went out over turn 2, way up in the air, landed on pit road, almost hit a pickup truck, and you broke your back. Now, you obviously can't drive, and probably anybody with a helmet was calling Pitkavish to get in the car. What happened?
What do you mean? What
well,
happened?
He parked the car, and I thought that was pretty special.
Yeah. Okay, in other words, rather than put another driver in it, he parked the car.
Yeah, and he said that if you weren't going to drive it, nobody was going to drive it.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right.
Now, prior to Joe retiring, and we'll talk about that. He decided to retire in '87. You and him together over 200 victories. I don't think anyone will ever accomplish that feat with one car owner in one division. I just don't see that happening.
To stay together that long is really great. But one thing that was really funny is when he was inducted in the Circle Track Hall of Fame, they asked him, in fact, it might have been you, asked him if he'd been racing 35 years altogether. He said, "Joe, if you had anything to do over again, would you make any changes?" And he says, "Yes." And I'm sitting back in the audience there, and I'm thinking, what would you change?
Yeah.
You remember what he said?
Yeah, he said, "I'd have hired Blackie 5 years sooner."
No, he said 1.5 years sooner. He said, "I felt I wasted 1.5 years because it was 1.5 years from the time I asked him until I finally got in his car."
Yeah, I was the one that asked him that. And, in addition to the Circle Track Club Hall of Fame, he was inducted into the Dirt Northeast Hall of Fame in weed sport. And we would be remiss if we didn't say that you were also inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1990. Joe passed away in February 2002 at the age of 88, but what a career that he had. Prior to you coming on board, Bucky Walters drove for him, Paul Walters, no relation, Schaefnocker, and Hecker, and he had moderate success, and I saw some of the races with those guys in it, but a dream team when you guys. Did he ever have any input or any thoughts on your late model efforts when you were doing double duty and both cars were there on the same night?
I never gave any thought. That was just part of the night. What was funny is one time Joe, he was only allowed 1 4-barrel carburetor on the modifieds, and the Hemi came out with 2 4-barrels on it, and he was having trouble getting gas to go to all the cylinders equally. He was gluing popsicle sticks in everything else trying to divert the fuel oil or the gas mixture into where it belonged. And he couldn't get it done. He said, "Blackie," he said, "I'm thinking about putting a couple fuel injections on these 4 cylinders so I can get it equal." I said, "Joe," I said, "that's ought to be, they're called fuel injection." And I said, "No, that'd be illegal." So about 2 months went by, and he never did it. And I said to him, I thought you was going to put fuel injection in, Joe, to, equal that up. He said, I got to think of what you said, Blackie. He said, how would it look if someone said I was cheating?
And along the same lines, when there'd be a rough night at the track or somebody would cause you guys a problem, he was a pretty quiet guy, let the car do the talking, and he would just say he kind of dealt with whatever cards he got at the track.
Yeah. They're talking about driving 2 different divisions and so forth. I was laughing. I was reading in the Speed Sport one time where a guy was going to build several cars, identical, late model driver. And someone suggests, no, you can't do that. It's not a good idea. It doesn't matter how much you try. You cannot build 2 cars equally. That way, he said, you get in one car and you won't be familiar with the other car. And you won't be able to do as good. I'm thinking, well, he's not much of a driver if he can't do anything better than that, because I jump out of a modified and get in a late model and go out and win both features.
You brought a lot of enjoyment to a lot of fans. I've had the opportunity to come to your house, and the trophies, wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling, the entire trophy room. Really enjoy watching you race. Look forward to seeing you up at the Speedway, and I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us tonight.
You're quite welcome. I appreciate it. The honor of doing it.
Okay, Blackie, thank you.
Sure enough.
What a legend. When I went to his house, we did some TV footage, and I needed a trophy for the Heinz History Center Sports Museum. Actually, one of his uniforms is down there. His picture's on the wall. Needed a trophy. So he gave me the one where they got fast time at Langhorne. He said, you can take them all if you want, but I don't think the History Center was ready for that, because it's a huge game room, big pool table in the middle, and we didn't get to talk about it, but early on, he was a boxer, and he won some matches.
That can come in handy at tracks from time to time.
From time to time, yeah. And, the nickname Blackie, he got that as a young kid at the family garage, because they would play cards at night, and every time he'd come out of the garage, and his hands were always black, and that's how he got his nickname. They'd say, hey, Blackie, go wash your hands, and then we'll let you play cards.
It's amazing, Don, the longevity of the career and the variety of cars.
Yeah.
It wouldn't happen today.
And on that Hemi, and I found out from talking to Jim Pitkavish, that's Joe's son, they used the same engine block for 25 years. Incredible.
The shocking thing to me, and what I respect about the drivers of that day, is that when using one car for a track that's a 1 mile flat track or using a half-mile high bank track, these guys had the same piece of equipment. Now you walk into a race shop, well, there's our big track car, there's our small track car, here's the car for a wet track, here's the car for a dry track. And these guys adapted to amazingly different cinder surfaces, clay, dirt, rocks, asphalt, with all the same piece of equipment. And that, to me, is true versatility.
You are listening to a pre-recorded version of TrackSide featuring the Joe Pitkavish Memorial Race at the Lernerville Speedway.
Is your race team looking for T-shirts, hats, or other racing apparel? Check out Classic Impressions Racewear in Pittsburgh. Go to www.classicimp.com and see over 200 designs and the latest in racing apparel. And if you see a great-looking shirt at the track, there's a good chance it's a Racewear shirt. If you're looking for dynamic racing T-shirts with no art or setup charges and low minimums, check out their Speed Gear line. Classic Impressions features the best-looking shirts around. Give them a call at 412-257-8020 or toll-free 1-800-775-8337. Or visit the Classic Impressions website at www.classicimp.com. That's CLASSICIMP.com.
We welcome Triangle Benefit Services as a new sponsor this year, co-owned by Dina Barbara and her husband Charles. Dina is a former open-wheel driver of the number 77 micro and sprint cars that were in competition at the local speedways. If you have a boat, ATV, RV, travel trailer, vacation home, motorcycle, rental property, classic car, they can take care of you. Triangle Benefit Services can help you with your homeowners, auto insurance, and any type of insurance you might need. Charles and his staff can give you quotes from many different companies, including Donegal, as well as other major companies like Progressive, AIG, Ohio Casualty, American Collectors, and Dairyland. Donegal Insurance routinely beats State Farm, Allstate, and Nationwide, and if you have a good driving record and good credit history, that's even better. Donegal is the lowest in the area for home and auto. Triangle Benefit Services is located at 128 Clairton Boulevard, Pittsburgh, PA. You can call them at 412-650-6500 or visit them at trianglebenefitservices.com.
For Paralyzed Veterans of America, Operation Iraqi Freedom veteran Jason Nielsen and NASCAR champion Richard Petty.
Richard, thanks for helping me and all the paralyzed veterans. You know you've always been my hero.
No, Jason, you're the real hero. Well, you and all the brave men and women who have given so much. America, please join me in helping all paralyzed veterans. Now, for more information, go to pva.org/GoPetty. It's time for us to show we care.
Thank you, America.
Thank you.
And now more Trackside from the Lernerville Speedway.
The Joe Pitkavish Memorial Race is a big race at Lernerville every year, and we're going to take a little bit of time to talk to Walt Weimer about Joe. You know, he was quite a guy. Early in his career, he had several different drivers driving for him, but once he settled in with Blackie Watt, they proceeded to make racing history.
For over 25 years, they were together as a team. It's almost unheard of in our sport.
The thing also, not only were they together 25 years, he used the same engine.
Yeah, those big Hemi Chryslers, boy, Joe used to love those things.
You know, when most guys were running Chevy engines, for whatever the reason, he decided that that's what he wanted to do. A Hall of Fame member, which we'll talk about at some point in time here. But your earliest recollections of Pitkavish and his cars?
Well, the earliest recollection of the car was the old red and white 88. While I was still living in Florida, I was reading a magazine article there, and Blackie had crashed a car at Langhorne, and there was a picture of the car being towed off. I think that might have been the year that he had a real quick time, or close to quick time, down there at Langhorne.
He set fast time at Langhorne, and it was a Ford sedan that was cut down as a coupe, and the body was moved to the back. And when they pulled into the track, Blackie said everybody was laughing because the motor, they hadn't had an opportunity to move the motor back, and they said, well, these hay seats from Pennsylvania don't know how to set up a car. But then after he went out and set fast time, he knew it was fast because they were like a swarm of locusts on the car when he pulled into the pits, and they said, I guess they figured that maybe these hay seats from Pennsylvania had the right idea.
And there was another car that they took down there. If I remember correctly, they won a qualifier at Jennerstown with it. It was about a 36 Plymouth Coupe, and it was number 88, but I think it was the old Valtech car. It was blue and yellow, 88 instead of red and white, and they took it down there. The car had been narrowed just a little bit. It was a much stalker body than the red and white one we were just talking about, but Gerber and the officials down there wouldn't let them run that car, and I think they brought it back and maybe run it a little bit, and at one point there, Dave Stewart and his son Bob had the car, and it might still be sitting up in Butler County.
That Bob Graham, Mike Graham's father, was the one that made the connection to Valtech. He was a teacher there, and they actually painted the car there. And I remember them bringing the car down to Clinton to run with some of the coupes down there, and obviously they won everything. But I think, you know, the early years, the 88 was a semi-famous car, but the orange number 1 was, well, I guess it was 88 when it first started, but then it transitioned into the number 1. I don't think there's anybody in short track racing that's ever seen a modified race that didn't see that car in Victory Lane and remember it.
Oh, yeah, and as you mentioned there, that car, when it was built to race down at Langhorne in the late 60s there, it was number 88. And they really built that car just for Langhorne. They took it down there 2 or 3 times, never had much luck with the car down there. And they decided to bring it back here and convert it into a dirt track car, because Langhorne was paved at that time, although it was dirt originally, and dirt when Blackie set the fast time down there. But it had been paved. Well, they brought the car back, and I don't know why, but they changed the number from 88 to 1 at that time.
probably because it was won most of the time on race nights. With that 37 Chevy Coupe with the Dodge engine, before they retired it, it actually had 110 victories. Then they went with a newer style body, and I know they picked up a Tobias chassis, and you being a diehard modified fan, probably maybe shed a little tear when it went from the old body to the new body.
Oh, yes, I did, because I definitely am a coupe guy. No question about that. The old coupes, I grew up with them, and they'll still always be my favorite race car. So, I didn't like it when it went to a Gremlin, but that's progress.
There was Blackie's success with Pitkavish was unbelievable. One night at Blanket Hill, they were in an Australian pursuit race, and he won the race in 3/4 of a lap. And the flagman said to Blackie, "Why don't you make a race out of it the next time?" But when they pulled the car into the pits, Pitkavish said to him, he said, "Way to go, Blackie! Don't wear out the equipment."
I can believe it. Yes, I can believe it. Yeah. Joe was pretty good, like saying things like that.
And Joe was a quiet man, but meticulous to the finest detail. I talked to his son Jim, and he said when that car was in the garage, he'd go over it with like a fine-tooth comb, and it was obvious because very seldom was there a DNF.
Oh, no, very, very seldom. And I have a picture at home someplace in my stuff of Joe actually working on a car. I think I took it up at Mercer when they were up there for a special race. They never raced up there regularly. But Joe was down on his knees, and he was tinkering away at the engine there, and I just snapped a picture. It was so normal, you might say, to see Joe like that.
We mentioned that fast qualifier Langhorne. That was in 1961. He was actually running third in the feature when they broke a kingpin and then knocked him out of the race. To show Pitkavish's loyalty to Blackie, the worst accident of Blackie's career was at Motordrome. I was there. It was in 1983. The steering broke. He went out over turn 2, way up in the air, landed, almost hit a pickup truck, and he broke his back. And it left Pitkavish without a driver, and a lot of people wanted to drive the car, and I think maybe you know what happened.
I think he just parked it, if I remember.
That's correct. They said if Blackie's not driving it, we're not racing it, and they actually parked it until he felt better, and once he was okay, they got back in it and started winning races again. And, Pitkavish made the quote one time, if I'd have known how well this was going to work out with Blackie, I'd have hired him 5 years sooner.
Yeah, and he had a number of other drivers before that. Bucky Walters was his first driver. Then he had Paul Walters, Bob Schaefnocker, who used to get around Heidelberg pretty good, and Dick Hecker. They all drove for Joe before Blackie moved in.
Actually, Blackie had asked him a couple of times about driving the car, but Joe was an honorable man, and he had commitments with these other drivers. And I think the night Blackie got in it, and I'm not sure, the driver, I believe it was Hecker, didn't want to travel to Jennerstown, and they put Blackie in the car, and that's what kind of sealed the deal.
I think that was probably while I was maybe down in living in Florida, and it wasn't around at that time. That was probably when they were running the old Jennerstown, the old Latrobe Penn Western circuit.
We have a lot of successful modified drivers today. We had a lot then. But I would be remiss if I could think of anybody that had the same car owner and the same team for 25 years.
No, as I mentioned earlier, it's practically unheard of, and even more so today because today there are so few actual car owners that get a hired driver, a helmet bag driver to run their car. With the economics of racing like it is today, most drivers are forced to run the car that they own or somebody in their family owns.
As far as sponsors goes, another case like this would be Lynn Geister with number 1 Cochran. I believe Lynn has passed the 25-year mark with Cochran.
Yeah, I think that happened 2 or 3 years ago.
Now, just modifieds in general, just a couple of notes here. You talked about John McGinley, and you talked about Dick Rankin, some top-notch drivers. Herb Scott won a lot of his races in a coupe before he went into the late models. Any thoughts come to mind about anyone else that maybe spent some time here at Lernerville? And Lou Blaney. I mean, geez, how could I forget Lou Blaney?
Well, yeah, how can you ever forget Lou Blaney? I mean, of modern times, he has to be the greatest at a modified. I think it's 334 races he won in a modified. That doesn't count a couple hundred probably in a sprint car. I think he's up around 600 career-wise, but even Lou doesn't know because they never kept records back in those days. But I don't like to compare drivers too much from different eras. I mean, go back to the days when I was growing up and you had the flatheads and you had you could run 7 nights a week or 7 races a week in NASCAR about 1951, 52. Dick Linder won 52 features in the Pallone Brothers V2 in 1 year. Now, he was driving a flathead Ford because that's basically all you had at that time. You didn't even have the overhead valve Fords out yet. So everything was either a flathead or it was a six-banger. It's impossible to me to really compare drivers of 2 different eras. It's almost like trying to compare Richard Petty with Dale Earnhardt with Jeff Gordon, Kyle Busch.
Some of the other drivers that really had a lot of success, Ed Lynch Sr. and Bob Waring Sr.
Oh, yes, they're right up there on the top in the modifieds. And the interesting thing, all of those drivers did double duty. With Blackie Watt, it was late models and modifieds. With Lynch and Quarterson and Blaney, it was all sprint cars and modifieds. And then Waring, again, was the late models and the modifieds. And many times they would run 2 cars in one night, and on a few occasions, one of those drivers could win 2 features in one night.
Ralph Quarterson, you brought that up. Another fellow that spent a lot of time in Victory Lane in western Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah, and there were certain tracks, particularly Mercer. You know, I used to call him the master of Mercer. Nobody ever got around Mercer Raceway like Ralph Quarterson. Didn't matter whether it was a sprint car or a modified or even a late model. There was 1 year back there in the 70s that Mike Ricosi was running the track, and he decided to bring in late models. And, you know, it wasn't a super field of late models. There were some other tracks like Lernerville and Schmuckers that had better quality at that time. But the guys running up there wearing a slouch. Ralph Quarterson won the most races. I think he won 5, and he was track champion. He'd never been in a late model before.
Any closing thoughts on the modifieds? A replica of Herb Scott's first ever full-bodied stock car, the Beckman Motors 180, compliments of Tom Robertson.
That would probably be a replica of the first car that I ever saw Herb run up at the Butler Speedway. He wasn't a regular up there, but he came up there a few times in the early 50s when NASCAR had the track. And with the Beckman 180 car, it was a metallic blue and silver with white numbers. The car that I'm remembering was a 32 Ford Coupe with a flathead. Now, later he had a Plymouth. I don't know whether it had a Hemi in it or not, but those were the Beckman cars prior to his glory years with Doc Farley in the pink number 8.
Yeah, before that they ran what they called roadsters, which was nothing much more than a hood, a seat, and a motor, and there wasn't a whole lot there. Walt, as usual, always enjoy talking modifieds, and I want to thank you for being part of our show.
Hey, it's been my pleasure, Don.
Thanks for listening to tonight's pre-recorded edition of TrackSide. Once again, to get more information about tonight's racing program at Lernerville Speedway, call the track office at 724-353-1511 or log on to lernerville.com. We invite you to be with us again next Friday at 6 p.m. and listen this Monday at 6 p.m. for Rappin' On Racing.
You've been listening to TrackSide from the Lernerville Speedway. Today's program was presented in cooperation with Triangle Benefit Service, Number 1 Cochran Automotive, Classic Impressions, and Yingling Lager. Your hosts for TrackSide are Don Gamble, Dick Curry, DJ Johnson, Eric Westendorf, and Walt Weimer. Plan to join us next Friday at 6 p.m. for another edition of TrackSide from the Lernerville Speedway.